I once overheard my mother on the phone. Emma is the biggest failure in the family. She said it with that cold, deliberate tone she reserved for people not worth mentioning. I could picture her perfectly, sitting in her polished office in Palo Alto, law degrees hanging neatly behind her like victory medals. And me, the youngest daughter, was nothing but a stain on that flawless resume. She can't do anything besides tinkering with computers at a tiny bank, my mother often emphasized. Meanwhile, my father, a renowned surgeon in San Francisco, would simply nod as if a verdict had already been passed. They were both certain I had ruined the plan they had mapped out since I was 8 years old, to inherit the Davis family's brilliant medical legacy. My brother Daniel was their endless pride. 4 years older than me, tall, confident, walking into Stanford Hospital in his white coat as though he was born to stand there. Patients trusted him at first glance. Professors remembered his name after a single discussion. At every family gathering, Daniel was the center, praised, compared, held up as the standard. Me. I was Emma, the youngest daughter, the one who shattered the perfect image my parents had built. All because of one number, 486. That was my MCAT score, so low no medical school in the United States would even look at my application. 4 years buried in the library studying organic chemistry until I forgot to eat or sleep, missing nearly every party of my youth, all of it instantly meaningless. I still remember that evening. My father sat at the dinner table, his voice flat as if delivering test results. No medical school will accept this score, Emma. You have to face the truth. My mother stacked receipts from tutoring and prep classes, then concluded like a lawyer presenting evidence. We invested in you for years. And this is the result. Daniel sat quietly, his scrubs still carrying the smell of antiseptic, softly suggesting, maybe you could retake it. But my father shook his head firmly. There's no chance. She doesn't have what it takes. I sat there, hands ice cold, feeling every word turn me into a stranger in my own home. From that moment, I knew they would never invest faith in me again. And I was right. Just a week later, my allowance was cut, my name erased from the family phone plan, and I was invited to leave the house I'd lived in for 22 years. Daniel helped me move into a tiny studio in Oakland. He put his hand on my shoulder, trying to reassure me, "Things will be okay, Emma. Mom and Dad will come around." But I knew he didn't believe his own words. In his eyes, I only saw pity mixed with disappointment. I started scraping by with a biology degree of little value and student debt hanging over me. After rejection from companies, I applied to a small community bank wedged between a laundromat and a nail salon. The role was nothing to dream about: IT support for customers with account issues. The salary was $34,000 a year, just enough to cover rent and instant noodles. But ironically, that place everyone dismissed was the first time in my life I felt I was doing something meaningful. I met customers society had easily abandoned: single mothers drowning in credit card debt, immigrants struggling to send money home, workers losing their paychecks to endless late fees. They looked at me with pleading eyes, and for the first time, I no longer heard my parents' cold voices saying I was nothing to be proud of. In my family's eyes, I was still a failure. But to those people, I was the one who could explain why their card was declined, or guide them through small steps to rebuild credit. And deep down, I knew my new path had just begun. A path my family would never have imagined. I'll never forget the morning that MCT envelope arrived at our Palo Alto house. The sky was cruelly blue. I sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling as I tore it open. The number stared back: 486. The world went silent, leaving only the pounding of my heart, loud, relentless, like a sentence handed down. 4 years of grinding, living like a ghost between labs and libraries, sacrificing my youth for a dream, gone in an instant. And the way my parents looked at me afterward was the real destruction. Not anger, not pity, but utter disappointment, as if they had just realized they bet on the wrong child. A week later, I faced them in the living room. My father crossed his arms, his gaze sharp like he was examining a patient. "Emma, it's clear. You can't continue down the medical path." My mother leaned forward, her voice like a prosecutor. "We spent tens of thousands of dollars on tutoring, prep courses, and a prestigious college program. And this is the result." I could only sit there, my throat tight. Daniel stood nearby, still in his white coat, offering a weak attempt at comfort. Maybe you could try again next year. My father cut him off, his voice cold. No. No medical school will accept a score like that. We have to face the truth. That night, I quietly packed up my books, shoving untouched textbooks into cardboard boxes. I left the big Palo Alto house in an old pickup truck, carrying only a few suitcases and my biology degree. My parents said nothing. My mother just left an envelope with a few $100s and a slip of paper with 4 words: "Take care of yourself." Daniel was the only one who helped me. He found a small studio apartment in Oakland. When he placed the key in my hand, I caught the look of pity in his eyes. "Hang in there, Emma. Everything will be fine." But that look told me he didn't believe it himself. The new room had nothing but an air mattress and a plastic table. Every morning I sat staring at the crooked window frame, wondering where I had gone wrong. I had a biology degree, but outside of a lab or med school, it was worth almost nothing. I began sending applications everywhere. Research labs, pharmaceutical companies, even a veterinary clinic. 12 resumes, 12 rejections. On the 13th day, desperate, I found a Craigslist ad: community bank in Oakland seeking IT support. I had no tech degree, but in high school I built websites and fixed computers for friends. I took a gamble and applied. The interview room was tiny with a scratched wooden desk. The manager, Mrs. Rodriguez, looked over my resume and asked, "Biology degree? Why do you want to work in IT?" I took a deep breath. Because I'm good with computers. And I learn fast. I just need a chance to prove it. Maybe she saw the determination in my eyes, or maybe the bank was desperate for staff. A few days later I got the call: "We've decided to hire you. Starting salary, $34,000. And so I stepped into a completely different world. That community bank wasn't glamorous. Wedged between a laundromat and a fast food joint, its customers were mostly people unwelcome at big banks. My job sounded dull. Explain why cards were declined, guide people through logging in, fix minor glitches. But within weeks, I realized every transaction hid a story that pierced the heart. One day I met a single mother with tears in her eyes, unable to get a small loan to buy a car for work. Another afternoon I sat for an hour with an elderly immigrant, patiently teaching him to send money online to his family. Each time I saw their relieved smiles, I realized I was helping in a way no medical training had ever allowed me to. Still, the shame of being the failed child haunted me. In my parents' eyes, this job was nothing more than a stopgap, barely worth mentioning. I knew they told friends, "Emma works at some small bank, nothing important." And every time Daniel reported a new success, a complex surgery, a paper published in a medical journal, the gulf between us felt impossible to bridge. But what they didn't know was that from inside that little bank, another path was quietly opening before me. I couldn't yet name it. I only knew that for the first time I didn't feel completely useless. And that fragile feeling was enough to keep me moving forward. I was no longer the med school dream my parents wanted. I was just Emma, an IT support worker at an ordinary community bank. But in the very place they dismissed most, the first seeds of an unimaginable future had begun to sprout. One drizzly afternoon in Oakland, I was called to the service desk. "Emma, can you help Mrs. Miller?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked. Mrs. Miller was a regular in her 60s, working part-time as a house cleaner. She placed a letter on the counter, her hands trembling. Bold red letters read, "Denied." "The bank won't give me a loan to fix my car," she whispered. "I've paid on time for 2 years, but they say my credit score is too low." I opened her file and saw the number, 518. An invisible label shackling her life. I sat with her, pulled out paper and carefully explained how on-time payments mattered, why keeping card balances low was crucial, how she could request a free credit report. With every word, her eyes grew brighter. When she squeezed my hand in thanks, I felt like I had just flipped a switch in a long dark room. That night I couldn't sleep. I searched online and the numbers stunned me. Over 45 million Americans stuck with weak credit scores. On average, they lost more than $1,200 a year to higher interest and penalty fees, enough to cover rent or medical bills. The system was a maze and most people were wandering lost with no one to guide them. My small apartment turned into an accidental research lab. On the table, instead of medical textbooks, I stacked piles of finance materials, books on credit, and an old laptop that ran all night. The more I read, the angrier I became. Not because of the numbers, but because of the injustice. People who paid their debts faithfully were still trapped, only because they didn't understand the hidden rules of the game created by credit institutions. One Friday evening, I reluctantly accepted an invitation to a fintech meetup in San Francisco. I wore a cheap dress from a thrift store and stepped into a room full of young people in suits and designer shoes. I felt like a counterfeit bill tossed into a vault of gold. First time here. A female voice came from behind. I turned around. She was a woman with curly brown hair, intelligent eyes, and a confident smile. I'm Sophia, a software engineer at a credit card company. I nodded, almost whispering, Emma. I work IT for a small community bank. I waited for her to turn away, but Sophia tilted her head, curious. Community bank? Interesting. What problems do your customers face the most? The question seemed simple, but it left me unsettled. No one had ever asked me that with genuine interest. I began telling her about Mrs. Miller, about customers with tears in their eyes when their cards were declined, about people who paid faithfully but could never escape the label of poor credit. Sophia listened in silence. Then she set her glass of wine down, her eyes lighting up. You know, I've worked with credit algorithms for 5 years, but I've never actually spoken with the people affected. What you're telling me is more important than any dataset. That night we stayed at a 24-hour cafe. Napkins and coasters became the sketchpads for our ideas. I blurted out, why not build an app that walks people step by step, helping ordinary folks optimize their credit as if they had a personal advisor? Sophia propped her chin on her hand, smiling brightly, yes. And we could use machine learning to personalize recommendations. Simple, easy to understand, but effective. We shook hands across a latte-stained cafe table, officially co-founders of an idea that didn't even have a name yet. In the weeks that followed, my studio apartment became our office. Computers hummed through the night, whiteboards filled with words and formulas. Sophia brought the technical expertise. I brought the real-life experience from hundreds of customers. We named the project ClearPath, a bright road. The idea was simple: give ordinary people the keys to escape the financial trap. On the first day of testing, I nervously sent links to a few familiar customers from the bank. 6 months later, the results exceeded every expectation. Hundreds reported their credit scores had improved significantly. A single mother texted me, "Thank you, Emma. I finally have enough points to buy a car to drive my kids to school." Every message was like a hammer smashing the failure label my family had stuck on me. I didn't dare tell them yet. But I knew one day this truth would be too big to hide. And I also knew the path I'd chosen was both risky and promising. I was no longer the girl who failed the MC. I had found my mission, and for the first time I was desperate to see it through. By 2019, while my family still believed I was just a lowly IT worker at a community bank, Sophia and I were quietly building ClearPath. We knew if I used my real name, Emma Davis, my parents would eventually find out. So I decided to take my mother's maiden name, registering the company as Emma Morgan. A new name, a parallel life that no one in my family knew existed. We had no office, no staff. The company was my cramped studio and a few late-night cafes in Oakland. Every line of code, every feature sketch was written on a wobbly wooden table or napkins still stained with coffee. Sophia often joked, when this becomes $1 million company, we'll hang this napkin in a startup museum. The beginning was just a small test, 500 beta users. I invited the same customers who had once begged me for help at the bank. 6 months later, the results left both me and Sophia stunned with joy. Their credit scores rose an average of 73 points. A man of Mexican descent texted me, "Thanks to the app, I just bought my family's first home." That was the moment we knew we were holding on to something extraordinary. Word began spreading in the startup world. A venture fund specializing in financial inclusion, Impact Ventures, asked to meet. Sophia and I pitched in a sleek glass-walled room, me wearing a borrowed dress just to look like a founder. After nearly 2 hours, they nodded, $250,000 seed round. For us at that time, it felt like winning the lottery. With money in hand, we rented our first office, a room no bigger than half a warehouse in Oakland's industrial district, but to us it felt like a palace. We hired 4 young programmers and a few part-time students to help with customer support. Every day stretched from 8 a.m. until 2 a.m. But no one complained. Everyone believed they were working to change the lives of millions. By 2021, ClearPath exploded. 50,000 users across all 50 states. On average, users raised their credit scores by 89 points in a year. 23% moved from subprime to prime. Internal reports showed they had collectively saved more than $12 million in fees and interest. Those numbers spread fast. The financial press began calling us a rising phenomenon. But every success carried pressure. Servers overloaded, the support team couldn't answer emails fast enough. Sophia and I knew we had to raise more capital. We prepared for our Series A. That pitch was the most stressful of my life. Dozens of seasoned investors stared back, every question sharp as a blade. But when I told the story of Mrs. Miller, of workers trapped simply because they didn't understand credit, the room fell silent. It was no longer a profit problem but a human story. In the end, Bay Area Ventures signed $5 million in Series A. With that money, we grew the team to 12 engineers, data specialists, compliance officers. We even signed licensing deals for our algorithms with 3 major banks, something I had never dared to dream. User numbers soared, 200,000, then 300,000. Each figure made me choke up whenever I looked at the dashboard. Yet ironically, my family still knew nothing. In their eyes, I was just the girl wasting her youth at a tiny bank. Last year, my mother even suggested I apply to be a teller at Wells Fargo to make life easier. I only smiled. She had no idea that at that very moment, ClearPath's financial reports were making big corporations nervous. Sometimes I wondered, am I on the right path? I kept every achievement hidden from my family, partly to protect myself from their scorn, partly to preserve some peace. But the more I hid, the heavier the secret became. Some nights, after the team left, I sat alone staring at the dashboard flashing 300,000 users, my mind tangled. I thought, when will they know their failed daughter built this? Sophia often told me, Emma, don't rush. One day the truth will speak for itself. I knew she was right. But I also knew that when that day came, there would be no turning back. By early 2022, the name ClearPath had caught the attention of financial giants. News of us helping hundreds of thousands of Americans escape credit traps spread like wildfire. Every morning, my inbox overflowed with offers of funding, partnerships, and especially acquisition proposals. The first call came from Sterling Capital, a prestigious financial group in New York. They invited Sophia and me to Manhattan, promising a can't-refuse negotiation. Stepping into their boardroom on the 40th floor of a glass tower, I shivered. The harsh white lights, the stern faces in gray suits, everything radiated the same energy I had despised back when I was the failure in my family. The lead executive opened, "We value ClearPath. Sterling wants to acquire it entirely for $75 million in cash. You'll receive retention packages for 3 years, and the company will become a division of Sterling." The number, $75 million, made the room go still. Sophia glanced at me, her eyes shining. I knew this was the dream of any startup. But when I heard the conditions, that the entire team would have to follow Sterling's processes, that our product would be absorbed into their platform, my heart sank. I pictured my young developers crushed inside a corporate machine. ClearPath would no longer be a bright road for vulnerable people, but just another feature in a giant ecosystem. I smiled, placed my hand on the folder, and said clearly, "We appreciate Sterling's offer, but we cannot trade ClearPath's soul for $75 million. The executives' faces froze for a moment. But I knew I had done the right thing. Less than 3 months later, another name appeared: Pacific Ventures, a fintech group in San Francisco. I will never forget the first Zoom call with Jessica Williams, Vice President of Corporate Development. Unlike Sterling, Jessica didn't start with a number. She told me about her childhood, growing up in a family constantly struggling with debt. Her eyes glowed as she said, "Financial inclusion isn't just a market. It's a human right. Pacific Ventures wants to acquire ClearPath because we believe in your mission." This time I stayed silent, my heart racing. When Sophia asked directly, "So what are the terms?" Jessica answered without hesitation, $100 million in cash. Full autonomy for your team. And a commitment to preserve your mission to serve vulnerable users. I sat there unable to believe my ears. $100 million. More than triple the previous offer. But more importantly, Pacific didn't want to turn ClearPath into just another branch. They wanted to lift us up, give us the resources to expand without losing our soul. Sophia gently squeezed my hand under the table, whispering, "Emma, this is what we've been waiting for." I nodded, but I didn't rush. I remembered my mother's scornful words. She just tinkers with computers at a small bank, nothing worthwhile. If she knew her youngest daughter had just stood before a $100 million deal, would she even believe it? I steadied myself, looked directly at the screen. "We agree in principle. But I have one condition." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "What condition?" I replied, "Pacific must allow us to continue developing free financial education programs for the community, even if they don't generate profit. That is the core of ClearPath." In that moment, I saw Jessica smile, her eyes softening. "Emma, that's exactly why we chose you." The call ended and Sophia threw her arms around me, her voice trembling with excitement. "We did it, Emma. 100 million. And most importantly, we didn't sell our soul." I laughed, but the smile was wet with tears. I thought back to the cramped studio apartment, to nights with Sophia sketching code on napkins, to eating instant noodles when my account had only a few dollars left. Now we held a future that felt impossibly big. Yet deep inside, I knew the journey wasn't over. I still had to face one thing: my family. They still believed I was just an anonymous IT worker. And soon the truth would come out. The question was, how would they react when they discovered their failed daughter was the one who had just signed a $100 million deal? That evening's setting was so lavish it made me feel out of place the moment I walked in. The Fairmont San Francisco, its top-floor restaurant glowing with crystal chandeliers over immaculate white tablecloths. From the windows, the Golden Gate Bridge shone like a golden thread across the sky. It was my brother Daniel's engagement party. In my family's eyes, Daniel was always the shining star, the brilliant surgeon, the embodiment of every dream my parents had drawn up. And me, Emma, was just the faded shadow they tolerated at the table. "Emma, you finally made it." My mother approached, her eyes flicking over the simple black dress I had chosen so carefully. She forced a smile. "At least this time you're dressed more appropriately." I knew it wasn't a compliment, but a reminder that I was just barely acceptable enough not to embarrass them. My father was busy raising a glass with Daniel's colleagues. I overheard his voice. "Daniel just completed a rare surgery and a medical journal is about to publish his research. We couldn't be prouder." Not a single word about me. Not even, "How's Emma doing these days?" They had seated me at the far end of the table next to a distant relative. Clearly, they didn't want the failed daughter near the VIP section full of doctors and lawyers. I smiled to myself for reassurance. They had no idea that sitting in my purse was a freshly signed $100 million contract. Daniel walked over, hugging me with genuine warmth. "Emma, I'm glad you came. I want you to meet my fiancée." He led me to a tall, elegant woman by the window. When she turned, my heart skipped. It was Jessica Williams, Vice President of Pacific Ventures, the very woman who had negotiated ClearPath's acquisition over the past 3 months. Jessica's eyes widened for a split second when she recognized me. But she quickly regained her professional composure, smiling politely. "So nice to meet Daniel's sister. He talks about you all the time." I extended my hand, smiling softly. "Congratulations to both of you." In Jessica's eyes, I saw the conflict. One side, Daniel's fiancée. The other, the anonymous CEO of ClearPath who had just signed a $100 million deal. The dinner began. Glasses clinked. My father rose for a toast. "We are so proud of Daniel, for the glory he has brought to our family. And now he's found a partner worthy of him." The room erupted in applause. I stayed silent, hiding a smile as I caught Jessica sneaking glances at me, her eyes asking, "How long will you keep this secret?" As the appetizers were served, Uncle Jim leaned toward me. "Emma, I hear you're still at that little bank? Any progress there?" I answered calmly, "I work in financial technology, helping users optimize their credit." My uncle shrugged, half pity, half mockery. "Ah, just a small job. But at least it pays something." Laughter broke out from a few relatives nearby. I gripped my glass, not out of anger but because I knew what was about to happen would change everything. In the middle of the scattered chatter, Jessica set her fork down, her voice ringing clear. Sorry, but I have to ask. Emma, you are Emma Morgan, founder of ClearPath, aren't you? The entire room went silent. Daniel turned to her, stunned. Jessica, what are you saying? Emma just works IT at a community bank. Jessica looked straight at him, her voice firm. No, Daniel. She is the one Pacific Ventures just signed to acquire a company for $100 million. Emma isn't just doing IT. She is the CEO who has changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of Americans. The last echoes faded. My father froze, his wine glass halted midair. My mother's mouth hung open, her trembling hand clutching her pearl necklace. The relatives who had just mocked me now sat in silence, their eyes wide. Daniel looked as if he'd just been told a patient had died on the operating table. He stammered, No way. My sister, is Emma Morgan? I looked around, smiling steadily. Yes. I kept it a secret because I needed to know I could succeed without my family's approval. The table erupted in whispers. Some were stunned, others hurried to raise their glasses in congratulations, as if to erase their earlier contempt. Finally, my father spoke, his voice shaking. Emma, did you really build that company? The one the press calls the future of financial inclusion? I nodded. The contract was signed today. ClearPath now officially belongs to Pacific Ventures, but the team and the mission remain intact. In that moment, I saw the walls of prejudice built over years begin to crack. Every gaze that had once labeled me a failure could no longer deny the truth. I, Emma, had turned the tables right at my own family's dinner. But I also knew this was only the beginning of difficult conversations. The truth was out, and from now on there was no turning back. After the engagement party, the atmosphere in my family felt like a room that had just weathered a storm. The murmurs, the confused stares, the heavy silence, all of it swirled around me. I left the hotel with the cold wind from the San Francisco Bay cutting across my face, my heart both relieved and burdened. The secret I had carried for years was exposed. And now the only path forward was to face it. The next morning my phone buzzed nonstop. A message from my mother. Emma, we need to talk. 11 o'clock at a San Francisco hotel. I took a deep breath, knowing this conversation would not be easy. In the quiet tea room of the hotel, my parents were already waiting. Daniel was there too, his expression both guilty and curious. When I walked in, all three looked up as if trying to see a person they had never really known. My mother spoke first, her voice trembling. Emma, why did you hide this from us? Why live two lives? I sat down, steadying myself, because I needed to prove to myself that I could succeed without needing your approval. After failing the MC, everyone called me a failure. I knew that if I told you I was building a company, no one would believe me. You would have laughed. I couldn't bear to feel that again. My father braced his hands on the table, the eyes that had always been cold now heavy with regret. We were wrong to force one path. We just wanted our children to have stability, but we forgot that success doesn't come in only one form. I looked him in the eye. I don't blame you for having expectations. But when you said I didn't have what it takes, those words drove into my heart like nails. They became motivation, but also scars. Daniel finally spoke, his voice lowered. Emma, I'm sorry. For years I kept telling you to find a stable job, to take more courses. I thought I was helping, but really I was just talking to someone I imagined, not the real you. I gave a faint, sad smile. You didn't mean to hurt me. But every time you said, maybe try applying at Wells Fargo, I felt like a child being led down the wrong road. I chose silence because I knew my truth wasn't yet big enough to be heard. The room fell into silence. Only the soft clink of a spoon against a teacup could be heard. My mother lowered her gaze, then gently took my hand. We've been blinded by what we thought was prestige. To us, only medicine and law were worth being proud of. But you've proven us wrong. You've done something hundreds of doctors and lawyers out there could not. Changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of ordinary people. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I froze, because in all these years I had never seen my mother cry because of me. My father gave a small cough as if to mask his emotions. Emma, we've never been good at apologizing. But today we must admit it. You've done something extraordinary. And we need to learn to respect you instead of only seeing you through the lens of failure. I nodded, replying with a choked voice, I don't need applause. I only need to be seen for who I truly am, a person brave enough to walk her own path. Daniel placed his hand on my shoulder, his voice hoarse. I'm proud of you, Emma. Maybe even more than of my own career. It took me far too long to realize that. That conversation didn't turn everything rosy. There were still gaps, still unhealed wounds. But it was the first time in my life I felt heard, felt acknowledged. When I left the hotel, the bay winds were still bitterly cold. But this time I felt a strange warmth inside. I knew the road to healing would be long and uneven. But at least the walls of pride had begun to crack. And from those cracks, a sliver of truth shone into the Davis family. The months after the acquisition, my life changed so quickly I sometimes had to remind myself this wasn't a dream. My new office was on the 38th floor of a glass tower in downtown San Francisco, looking down at a city lit up like a giant circuit board at night. Pacific Ventures kept their promise. ClearPath wasn't absorbed, it became the cornerstone of their financial inclusion division. I was appointed as executive director, tasked with expansion across the United States. We partnered with 200 community banks and dozens of credit unions across the Midwest and South, places few had ever paid attention to. I'll never forget the trip to Nebraska when a tiny rural bank integrated ClearPath. The manager, his eyes wet, told me, "We've lost too many customers because they couldn't escape the credit trap. Now, thanks to your app, this whole community has another chance." Those words gave me more strength than any revenue report ever could. Alongside expansion, Sophia and I began hosting workshops for high school girls and college students in STEM. Each month, we welcomed dozens of young women to our office, sharing not just tech skills but stories of resilience after failure. I remember a girl named Maya, 17, shyly saying, "My mom says I should study law because tech is a waste of time. But I love programming. I want to build an app to help diabetes patients manage their health better." I looked at her and saw my younger self. Build it, Maya. Don't be afraid of being dismissed. Find people who believe in your dream even if they're not in your family. And don't shut the door because one day your parents will understand. Every time I saw those young eyes light up, I was reminded of the true purpose of my journey. ClearPath wasn't just a financial tool, but proof that being different wasn't failure. Meanwhile, at home things began to change too. For the first time in years, family dinners weren't centered on Daniel's achievements. One evening, my mother put down a finance magazine, her voice slightly awkward. "Emma, I just read an article about fintech. They said this industry could change the entire traditional banking system. I think you chose the right path." My father, on occasion, even called me with questions I never thought I'd hear. "So, did ClearPath hit its user target this quarter? With interest rates fluctuating, how does that affect your model?" I smiled, answering patiently. He might not fully understand yet, but at least he was trying. Daniel had changed a lot too. One night, after dinner at his apartment, he admitted, "I always thought I was the one who knew what it meant to save someone's life. But you've saved entire families from financial ruin. I've never said this before, but I'm proud of you, Emma." I laughed, feeling the distance between us finally melt away. Of course, there were still moments when Mom slipped. "Daniel's been invited to head a department at the hospital, and Emma, well, you must be busy too, right?" But then she stopped herself, her eyes softening, as if realizing she'd nearly fallen back into old habits. I gently replied, "Mom, our successes are different, but they both matter." And she nodded, for the first time truly agreeing. 6 months later, ClearPath announced a partnership with a credit union alliance in the Midwest. Over 1 million new members gained access to financial tools they'd never dreamed of having. Looking at the map of the United States on the screen, each glowing dot appearing with every new sign-up, my eyes welled up. From a studio apartment with an air mattress, I was now leading a team rewriting how Americans understood and managed credit. That evening, as I sat on the balcony looking down at the city lights, I got a text from Sophia. "Emma, sometimes I still can't believe it. We went from napkins to 200 banks." I replied, "Yes, and we're just getting started." In that moment, I realized my journey wasn't just about proving something to my family, but proving to myself that true worth doesn't come from walking the path everyone expects. It comes from daring to create your own. And finally, my family was beginning to understand that. One May morning, just as I finished a meeting with the tech team about launching a new feature, My assistant brought in a thick envelope stamped with the Forbes logo. I opened it and my heart skipped a beat. Inside, the editorial board formally invited me to appear on the cover of their special issue, Credit Genius Steps into the Light. I read the words over and over. A magazine my father once treated as the Bible of business, now wanted to put me, the daughter once called a failure, on its cover. When the issue was released, the entire Pacific Ventures office erupted. Employees held the magazine high, running down the hallways. Sophia threw her arms around me, her eyes sparkling. "Emma, you've truly stepped into the light." But to me, this wasn't the destination. It was only the beginning of something new. Many nights I lay awake thinking, if I've had the chance to change the lives of millions, what can I do for people like me back then, the ones dismissed after failure? That's how the idea for the Second Chances Foundation was born. A fund to support those who take non-traditional paths after setbacks. I wanted to give scholarships, provide mentors, and most of all, deliver the message that failure isn't the end. It's the foundation for a new beginning. At the launch ceremony, I stood on stage before hundreds of guests. My parents sat in the front row with Daniel and Jessica beside them. I looked out, took a deep breath, and said, "One day all of us will stumble." I once failed the MC and was branded a failure inside my own home. But that fall led me here. The Second Chances Foundation was created to say this: you don't have to follow the beaten path to prove your worth. If you keep building your dream, sooner or later the world, and even your family, will have to see you. Thunderous applause filled the hall. I caught my mother's gaze, her eyes wet but full of pride. My father sat tall, not from professional pride but from respect for me. After the ceremony, Daniel came up, his voice thick with emotion. "Emma, you didn't just prove your own worth. You opened a door for those who've never been seen. I've never been prouder." That night, our family gathered around the small dinner table in Daniel and Jessica's apartment. There were no awkward comparisons, no judgmental glances. My father told me about a young patient who wanted to study computer science but whose family was forcing him into medicine. And he said that for the first time he advised the boy to follow technology if that was his real dream. My mother shared that she had joined an online course about financial technology, just to better understand her daughter's world. I couldn't hide my smile. The same woman who once scolded me for not becoming a doctor was now studying fintech just to have conversations with me. After dinner, I stepped onto the balcony, looking at the city stretched out like a sea of light. Daniel stood beside me, holding a glass of wine, whispering, "I spent my whole life following the road our parents chose. You chose your own and turned it into a miracle. Maybe you're the bravest one in this family." I turned to him, smiling softly. "No, I just had nothing left to lose, so I took the risk. But it turns out when you dare to believe, the world starts to believe too." In that moment, I realized the circle had closed. From the girl once branded a failure, I now stood here, seen with respect by the very family who had once doubted me. As night fell, I received a message from a girl who had joined last month's STEM workshop. "Emma, I just got a full scholarship in data science. I used to fear I wasn't good enough, but I remembered your words. Worth comes from within. Thank you for giving me faith." I sat in silence, my hand resting on the phone screen, eyes brimming with tears. That was the moment I knew. Titles, $100 million deals, or the Forbes cover, they were only the surface. The true value was planting in others the belief that they too deserve a second chance. That night, I wrote a single sentence in my journal: success is not proving to others that you're not a failure. Success is when you build a dream so big that the whole world, including those who once doubted, must acknowledge it. And for the first time, I felt truly free. Emma's story shows failure isn't the end, it can be the beginning of a greater journey. From a girl branded a failure after the MC, she dared to choose her own path, patiently built value, and created impact for hundreds of thousands of people. In real life today, the message still holds. No one has the right to define you but yourself. If you're persistent enough to chase your dream, you can turn scorn into strength and force the world to see your true worth. What do you think of Emma's journey and how she reclaimed her true value? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel to catch more moving stories about life and family.